Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the random networking session and maybe met one or two new colleagues. So here we are at our fireside chat, and this is our last full session of the day. And we're here with Rohan Light and Craig Fleisher, my fellow CI fellow, talking about technology and society now and next. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Craig Fleisher. Welcome, Craig and Rohan.
Well, thanks, Cynthia. Well, we're thrilled to be able to get by the fireside. Rohan, I don't know if you have a fire near you. I actually don't have one near me. I live in Atlanta, and fireplaces are not exactly ubiquitous here. So, anyway, for those of you who don't know, Rohan is in New Zealand. I'm looking forward to hearing his perspectives, and I'm sure you will be too. So I want to just start out. I'll do quick introductions for those who don't know me. I am a CI fellow. I'm the current vice president of the group, one of its founding members, and former skip president. And most people know me because I probably wrote a book or two that someone may have come across as an intelligence pro. These days, I actually teach in a medical college and get to have a wonderful group of doctors and doctors-to-be and other graduate students who are learning how to use open sources and doing research and consulting. So really enjoyable. And some of that health and medical side on the vertical, I think I share with Rohan. And another thing I happen to share with them, and I'm actually probably interested in exploring a little bit more deeply over the course of the next hour, I spent some time in New Zealand as well. So I actually lived for a few months in Hamilton on the North Island and Dunedin on the South Island, and did some of my sabbatical years over there in the land of the long white cloud, and really excited to revisit some of what's been happening there. We're going to be jumping into this intersection that Cynthia mentioned, which is really going to be looking at technology, but we're looking at technology where it's going to be intersecting business, first of all, but government and society as well. So this intersection of business, government, society, and technology is where we're going to kind of be looking at it. And, as I was talking to Rohan earlier, we're going to be looking at it from about 30,000, kilometers up or meters up, actually, more likely, for those of us who are into the metric side of the world. So on that note, let me introduce our star of this particular hour. Rohan, do you mind sharing us a little bit about your background? Tell us what you've been doing, your experience and insights.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak today. Yes, I'm from New Zealand. I do apologize for my accent. You're just gonna have to grin and bear it. I grew up here in Wellington, New Zealand, so beautiful place, lots of wind. And I also spent the second half of my life here in the rural areas in the Wairarapa. So I've got a bit of an urban and rural mix there. My core profession is risk. I love risk. I think it is a master key. As long as you hold the key in the right direction and apply it to the right part of the door. And it is one of my key sort of lenses on life. And the third thing I think to probably preface this is my primary lens before risk as a young man was history. So I'd read history and science, and love it. My basic advice to anyone is if you want to learn something, just read its history and spend a bit of time with it, and you'll understand how things move over time. And as it turns out, time is A, really important, and B, really not well managed in business environments. Back to you.
All right, that sounds great. So I want to start off. It's funny. I know in the sessions I've been listening to all 2 days worth of sessions of this summit. We're at the tail end of it, Rohan. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I wanted to start off. We've been hearing a lot of what I would call kind of concerns across continuums. I love that you said you love risk, and we don't get a lot of people in our field that love risk. Actually, most of the folks in the applied intelligence field try to do what we call de-risk a lot of the kinds of decision, context and action context and planning context that they're in. But I do want to start with that. And there's been an awful lot of discussion around data and what we can do with data and data analysis and data transformation and every other thing that we do with data, literally running from the, the gamut from, data hygiene and, data maintenance, data securitization, et cetera. So I want to start off with this idea of data ecosystems. And one of the things we do in the intelligence field is a lot of us apply a variety of canvases to our work. So for example, many of us would use the business model canvas or the lean canvas, you can imagine. Yeah, and I know probably better than most of us on this call, on this particular webinar about the data ethics canvas. So I want to start, if you wouldn't mind, what's important about the data ethics canvas, especially for those of us who work in a world of open sources and, again, and the fire hose of data. What should we know about it? Why is it important? And is it something that we might be able to employ in our own work?
Yes. How about that for a single answer? Okay, so yes, canvases are excellent tools for ordering causal information. So that's the first thing to call out. When you look at a canvas, it's a dynamic thing moving, caught in a moment of time. So that's why we really like them. In other words, they encourage good exploration into complexity. Right. So the data ethics canvas is put out by the Open Data Institute in the UK. They have a range of really good tools. Now, the reason why we look at the data ethics piece is data doesn't exist independently from humans. There is no data tree. We don't go to the data potato field and dig up potatoes and data. We create it, even by the simple act of conceiving of something. So ergo, all data is, it's like spaghetti. When you drop spaghetti onto a table, you've got a ton of interactions moving in curves. So what that means is every time there is an interaction between different groups of people, there will guaranteed be a power dynamic. That power dynamic will have ethical implications. How the heck do you surface that when you're basically frame blind? We're all stuck in our own frames. We cannot see. We can't see out two different windows at once. We can only look at out one. So how do we control for our own frame blindness? We use a structured formatting technique like the Open Data Institute Data Ethics Professional course, which I'm on, Data Ethics Canvas. Right. All right, that's my plug.
So when you do this with folks, which are the harder elements of the canvas for them to really grasp? I mean, is it rights around data sources? Is it the sources themselves? Is it again, you're into risk, right? So I mean, I would think things like negative effects on people might be important, minimizing negative impact. Where do you find when people are actually applying that data ethics canvas, do they struggle the most to get a keen grasp of what they need to know to move forward?
Non-numerate or numbers averse people will struggle the closer they come to computation. Data people struggle with the vectors, the social vectors of the information they receive. They are largely, can be, context blind. And because they're working with data, quote unquote, as agents, they have already moved to an instrumental place. They are doing things to data. Data, as I said before, it's not independent of humans. And as we know from the metaverse, a digital self can be manufactured. And actually, we can then perform unconscionable operations on digital selves that we would not at all do with a person. And then we call it, hey, testing. And then we worry that later on down the track, we keep surfacing these unseen ethical problems. And we discover that actually we've been wrong from step zero.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's scary.
There's no doubt about that. And you know, we think about ethics really in three ways in any kind of applied research. You know, the three ways that almost always will show up. I used to be chair of what's known as an institutional research board for a couple of universities. And, you know, there's always three dimensions that we keep in mind. The first of which is respect for persons. The second of which is beneficence. And, you know, and the fact that whatever the benefits of the data applications are, they've got to outweigh whatever the harms are. And last but not least, of course, when there is a distribution of harms, it needs to be done justly. So the idea of kind of the justice approach. Talk about some of your experiences where you've seen individuals run into ethical dilemmas or ethical concerns, or even worse, ethical transgressions that they just, you know, it was an unexpected consequence of their attempt to, you know, wrangle the data in an appropriate way.
Okay. The first thing we always have to do is look for category errors. Now, when we look at respect for persons, beneficence, and justice, they are patient-based ethical constructs. And yet the people being instrumental with data have agent-based ethical constructs. Ergo, the fall over is to always look to what you can do. That's the agent-based situation, rather than looking at the effects of what you do in the environment around you. And that will show up in patient-based or environmental ethics approaches. What this means is that you're basically, the more hard out you go as, you know, a strong agent-based front foot approach, the less likely you are to be actually able to participate fully in that patient-centric ethical conversation. The way forward is to back into it. So you always have to, if you're the movement from agent-based to patient-based ethics, agent-based people back into it. Okay. So you're backing into the impact and effects you are having on the environment.
So one of the things I know we run into in our field of applied intelligence is what we would generally classify as kind of agent principle problems. And where I'm going with this is, right? So where I'm going with this is, you know, a lot of times as intelligence professionals, we'll be asked by our principals, or, you know, our bosses, our superiors and decision makers to go ahead and do research on things. And sometimes the phenomena that they're asking us to research is unclear. Sometimes it's being hidden. They have their own political reasons for doing that. And sometimes they don't actually know what they want to ask for. So, you know, it's really hard to do any form of data transformation if you can't understand the real crux of the problem that you're going to be researching in the first place. So what's been your experience with helping to try to help companies or people that do this kind of work to have to do data transformation, hopefully for beneficent purposes? What would you recommend are some of the actions that these organizations or people can take to reduce this occurrence of principal and agentry kinds of issues and errors?
Great. Okay. So agent and principal based dynamics increasingly are leading to market failures.
That's right.
Platforms are elbowing markets out. All right. So let's just hold that in place right now and go, okay, well, that's probably going to invalidate a whole bunch of our rule book. Okay. Uncertainty-based approaches. Uncertainty is like a shadow to information. If you want to understand something, reduce your uncertainty about your environment. Information will emerge in some sort of priority order as we're moving through time. Our ability to make sense of that order that it is emerging in is a critical element. It's the creative, it's the imaginative element. It can't be delegated, and it can't. Machines can't do it. So this is why I use uncertainty techniques. Don't identify what you don't know. Just reduce the overall uncertainty in the environment. And we do that by applying empirical techniques and critically, getting separation between the concept of a threat event and negative probability, aka risk. Going back to a previous point, I'm trying to hold in my head. When people take risk-averse processes, they are removing large amounts of positive variability from their option set. Okay, path dependence. So, if you want to get more of what you've got, do more of what you're doing. If you want less, change it. It's an ancient and old piece of advice.
All right, it's a really good piece of advice. So one of the other things that we deal with frequently in this field is this. There's viewed as a gap between once we actually get the data patterned in ways that make sense, between that and getting an executive to actually take action on it. So we call this kind of the insight to action gap. Talk to me about some of the recommendations you would have to help the folks that are not only in our audience, but to help their other colleagues in the organization bridge this insight to action gap.
So essentially what's happening there is we've got a reversal. We have a causal reversal. All right. It's a tricky thing to manage. You reveal it by testing an information movement that moves vertically through an organization from both ends, independently of knowing what the other is doing. All right. So we're basically wanting to know whether or not there is, if the management crew throw a paper dart at the organizational governance crew, does it land in the same place where the organizational governance crew are currently standing? If it does, brilliant. Then information through your governance and management membrane is working as fine. There's a problem somewhere else. My sense is a fundamentally devalued and practice of governance since the mid-80s. Right. We have very strong management cultures, but they're not constrained by a governance culture.
Right.
In any competitive sport, you're only as good as your opponent. There is a positive conflict relationship between governance and management. When we have largely unconstrained management, they're almost doomed to really not take that big second level step that they're actually employed for. That's my theoretic response to that.
Yeah, and the same thing's true, I suspect, up there at the level of nation state governance. And where I'm going to go with this is this continuum between the regulation of data analytics, data transfer, data exchange, and the underregulation, or the so-called Wild West show of the world of data. So what I'd like to kind of run by you is, where is the right place? Where first of all, where do you think many or most nation states are now on this overregulation to underregulation kind of continuum? Are they in the right place, or has it maybe moved a little bit to one side or the other? And is there a desirable place along that continuum that you suspect might end up creating a new equilibrium?
Boy, there's a lot in there. So let's just quickly distinguish between three broad philosophies on data governance. State-centric, China. Business-centric, US. Citizen-centric, EU. Okay. Sorry, can you just remind me of the question again, that last part?
So the question is, where are these organizations? I suspect nation states.
That's right.
And I think I just heard part of your answer was China being on the overregulation totalitarian side. I heard you say EU being citizen-centric. So by the way, is one of those three places maybe more desirable than others? In order for again, data governance to proceed in a, in the most effective, efficient, and efficacious way?
Yep, definitely. Just to clarify, actually, there's some excellent data governance coming out of China as they are trimming Alibaba, as they are also threatening Taiwan and doing various other things. Okay, so from a professional observation perspective, there's lots to understand from the China approach right now. I think we need to reject the typology, the initial typology, which is China is state-centric. There, when you look at Tencent and Alibaba, these are colossal things. They're colossal things. They're not going to have Zuckerberg problems either. So the bigger issue, of course, is data governance is politicizing. Everything is politicizing as we're being drawn into the conflict scenario, which has probably been delayed for quite a while. So that means we've probably still got some time to work through. What that means is that every data governance strategy, AI strategy, whatever, needs to be seen as a political statement. Those political elements identified and moved to the side such that there can be a professional sort of look at what remains. Going to your question, the US, all you've got to do is look at Section 280. You know what the solution is. You know where the solution is. You know what's going on. Obviously, you know you've got some significant political problems right now. You know you can't build a consensus. You know that's really problematic for you. The EU is moving heavily into the rights-based situation, but it's also encountering problems with vague generalisms floated by policy people. And then, you know, what are we left with? We're left with everyone else who are in various stages of dependence or post-colonialism, which is the phase we're going through. And so then we were going, okay, well, what are we going to choose? Which elements? And as we were saying off stage before, from Kim.com to Peter Thiel, we're sort of a bolt hole for libertarians. How did that happen? But we're also extremely focused on social cohesion and the benefits of us living together on our little island at the bottom of the world. So every country has this really interesting mix of these three types all jumbling around. Now, because things are politicized, everyone is thinking with the blood in their head, and we have a great difficulty in establishing a functional middle ground.
I'm thinking, you know, there in the medical and health field, we often talk about the importance of the social determinants of health. As I hear you talking about this, I'm thinking about the social determinants of data and data, you know, use, governance, et cetera. Those social determinants seem to be taking on, again, an increasingly, you know, prominent role, obviously, in a lot of different nation states and regions and so forth. Where do you think the continuum, I guess I'm going to keep using that word, this continuum between where we see polarization occurring? You use the word politicization. I see a lot of polarization, by the way, which may be a byproduct of politicization, but also this you know, strong recognition that maybe inclusivity could be important in making, again, greatest and best use of the data. Where does data fit into this polarization and politicization question? So not only do we have social determinants of data, sometimes the data determine the social, you know, fabric that then provides the context within which, you know, data is shared. Is there a way out of this? You know, can we slow polarization and politicization?
We have to see it in order to find a way out of it. So, so my full quote around this element is data is socially constructed and politically situated. Yeah. All right. So immediately, anybody that is submitting evidence behind a claim, there will be this continuum, this spectrum of accuracy and precision, that sort of little element there. Our aim is to get a sufficiently high minimum to chase out the absolutely crazy stuff. Look, I moved a hurricane with my little Sharpie. I'm amazing. Right. You know, which is like the really don't get what just happened just then, but we all saw it. Yeah, we all saw it, right? And we are chasing, one of the things that we're doing, going back to the VUCA element, is that we are seeking to remove ambiguity from a system.
Right.
Ambiguity is associated to polysemy, so multiple meanings. So one of the things that we have to do painstakingly, as if we were an electrician crawling around rewiring everything, is we have to be identifying these polysemic and ambiguous concepts and then removing the ambiguity from them such that professionals can then harmonize them and we can get the system working.
So kind of building on that, how important will it be then to generate kind of consensus around definitions in the data analysis and governance world? Can we get consensus around definitions?
Definitely we can. It's called the ISO. It's this international standards organization,
Right.
been around for ages. If you've served on one, you'll know that it is the most painstakingly detailed crawl through a topic. I mean, it is, these things are taxonomically accurate things. Okay. We also know that we can, combine various standards bodies' outputs. And the reason why we do that is what I term we can produce analytics of known quality, by which I mean we can chase out the changing hurricanes with a Sharpie. We can actually identify without BS and without vendor bragging and without, being worried that your report last month will be contradicted by your current set of data. Yeah. Sorry, I've actually just lost track of my train of thought. Can you remind me of the question again?
Yeah. So the question was, again, would we get clarity and consensus of these definitions around, again, data and data governance?
Yeah. Yes, we can. Yeah. So then, gee whiz, it falls back to political will. Golly gosh, isn't this interesting? So this is why I say every data issue is a social issue. And if you want to understand the social issues, you must have a good theory of power. Without a good theory of power, you can't explain half of the stuff that's going on around you, which is, by the way, for many organizations, as they're recognizing that the business models created through that period, 1980 to mid 2000s,
yep,
large amounts of it is utter crap. It's essentially soothsaying. It's some sort of performative ritual whereby we claim insight from really poorly performing models. And one of the ways to tell is whether or not you can get any of these static models to turn into a dynamic model that makes sense. And you won't. Many of them will fail. And we got a really good taste of that in 2008 with the GFC, right? A whole clade, you used ecosystem before, a whole clade of models failed at once across multiple domains concentrated within a vertical. That is an extinction level event. And everyone at that point should have gone, oh my God, how much other BS decision tools do I have in my kit bag? Back to you.
Great. So I want to use a concept that some of us in the intelligence field use a lot, and talk about some of the temporal dimensions. I actually have a question in our chat here that is asking about this. And so where I'm going with this, Rohan, is that we have what we call kind of a sightline ladder, and that sightline looks at data over time, right? So it's longitudinal. It starts with what we call hindsight, right? Looking back, trying to explain what happened. It moves into oversight, which is what we call, at least in our field, situation analysis. It's what's happening now, and then why. Why is it happening? It moves into what most of us actually specialize in, which is insight. And insight is, very much about how do you take all that stuff that's happening now and optimize it. And then there's another area that moves even a little further out temporally that, again, we call foresight, which is really kind of thinking about, what are the best and worst things that might happen, if different pathways and different patterns actually manifest themselves. So the question here then is, do you have any recommendations for how data can be applied to any one of those sight lines? I'm comfortable with any, although the question that our colleague Cynthia actually asked is, is there some way to take data, however generated, and really begin to apply it towards generating as far out in the future as can, this idea of foresight? Any suggestions you have, or is this, again, is predictive data just, predictive use of data something that we're just not ready for?
Yeah, great, man. That's awesome. I really like that. Hindsight, oversight, insight, and foresight. Just for what it's worth, everything I know about competitive intelligence, I learnt in the last hour and a half. So this is the first time I've had a particular decision tool. So what I would say, if we just go back to my spaghetti metaphor, so pick up a piece of spaghetti in your mind and put 4 rings on it. And they are in order. There is a temporal order, okay? And so then you're always thinking about an interaction that extends through time, not over time, through time.
Right.
The first point I'd make about hindsight is that actually all we see is the past. We cannot see the future. The best we can get is to sort of look over our shoulder a bit as we sort of fall backwards through time. Some elements in that hindsight stream of data will be strongly predictive. Others won't. They get less useful as you move through time. Your oversight piece, which is quite interesting, I'd say, oversight and insight comprise a present, which is an interesting. What I like about oversight is that it indicates the mind that sees the mind.
Right.
So there is a frame blindness control there. And that is definitely where I'd be seeking to make sure that all your decision making controls are good, effective. Because any category errors that emerge here will be multiplied through what you think is happening. And the delta between what you think is happening and what is happening is described by uncertainty, a whole bunch of it, which will be risk.
That's right.
Insights, I like that one, isn't it? One of the curious properties of data is it can expand internally. So you can increase its internal volume without increasing its external surface area. It's the weirdest thing. And insights is a high meaning extraction. You're taking large amounts of meaning from a context.
Right.
Goes back to that mental picture of dropping the spaghetti on the table. It's all those interactions. Remember, for you, it's frozen in time, but all of those velocities and trajectories are still moving, and the bloody things might come back on you too, because one of the odd things around this practice is that you don't know if you're looking at the future or the past.
Right.
Must read physics. Basically, everyone should be reading physics if they're not already. Foresights, the further from now, the more we're venturing into the cloud of probability that's surrounding our future pathways. Right. What this means is that for certain classes of data, the same ones that predicted well in the past will predict well in the future. The planet will keep rolling around. We think we will keep seeing the sunrise. Other things are not at all predictive, and they're the amenable future that can be profitably speculated on for some things is very short and very small. It vanishes, in fact.
Right.
So figuring out what is reliable and not is really, really important. And I'll just say, if there's a human interaction, if there's multiple human interactions, the reliability drops like crazy. And that will then take you back to ideology, dogma, politics, and power.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why, so many people were so high on crowdsourcing 10 and 15 years ago, right? I mean, oh yeah. And by the way,
Yeah.
I've even seen applications of crowdsourcing used to solve, kind of, one-off medical ailments. Somebody's got this unique, confluence of different kinds of, problems. They're showing something that can't be diagnosed using expert systems or anything else. And yet they can go out, they can try to crowdsource. Somebody out there must have also had this confluence of variables that have caused this person to be ill. So, the question is then, can we or should we be trusting crowdsourcing? Is that something I might even be able to use in trying to develop insight or maybe even foresight?
Yes, but it must be controlled. Okay, crowdsourcing. All right, so everyone on this call, we're asked the same question, and we go, "Oh my goodness, we're all peers," and we answer the question, except that I'm a cat, and none of you knew.
Right.
And I just go plinkety plonkety, and it's my input that changes the model. Yeah, exactly. Right. So there is equality in the crowd.
Oh yeah.
Now, we do need that crowd to have a minimum N number. We do need that crowd to have a certain, a diversity, a minimum amount of variability. And we do need that crowd to have some degree of minimum capacity and capability. Before we assemble it, to essentially treat it as a randomizing function.
Yep.
And it's a better randomizing function than your AI. I just read this morning that in Quantum magazine, one human neuron, the output of one human neuron can be replicated by 7 layers of AI neurons.
Wow.
Oh, we're really smart. Why are we letting machines convince us that we're dumb? and now I've lost track of what the question was.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something. So, one of the questions we get a lot, we look at these data patterns and we see an outlier. We see an N of 1, or maybe, we see again, some bits of the data that, again, for whatever reason, don't fit the logical patterns that we think it should, or we think it might. And we may not even have models to deal with it. So one of the questions we get asked a lot when we see these, outliers, something that's sitting there, 4 standard deviations off our mean, how do we know when that outlier might actually be important? How do we know when the outlier might not actually be the solution that we're seeking, as opposed to whatever's a little bit closer into the, the mean and the median?
Well, obviously, being good practical scientists, you would compare the output of the data with your theory of change, which is your best current understanding of what is happening expressed as a model before we got to the data. Big difference between data-free model, model-free data.
Yep.
If you derive your model from your data, you are caught. You are caught. You derive your model before you get to the data, and then you run the data through the model. When you get an outlier, aka a contradiction, it is a learning opportunity to improve your theory of change. Yep. Now, why doesn't this happen more? I'll go back, because sitting behind the theory of change is your theory of power. People will stop this stuff because they don't like it. They don't understand it. Right. So the other note I took there was, that's right. This is empiricism. This is practical empiricism.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely. A large part, the opposite to having lots of data that's good is being good without lots of data. Now, we're able to drive out large amounts of uncertainty from the first few observations. We actually don't necessarily need large amounts of it. And if you know your basic maths, if the scale of knowledge is increasing, we are becoming progressively dumber. Simple denominator, base rate. Oh, that would be one of my #1 rules, by the way, base rate neglect. Yeah. Not understanding what the correct base rate is. one of the most common methodological decision-making problems I see is people who have expectations and confirmation bias in their data. Yeah.
Absolutely.
They want a certain result. And one of the ways to get that certain result is to change the base rate. Simple. No one would notice unless
no, we see this all the time, by the way, especially in visualizations that people have, and they're distorting and manipulating those those anchors and those scales so that we can't see. We get to see exactly what they want us to see, right? Not what the truth is.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we often arise at too in our field, our decision makers aren't looking for 100% confidence. They're not looking to have Six Sigma levels of precision in what we do. So you mentioned earlier, I want to go back to this. In the field of intelligence, we're always, again, I'm going to use this continuum idea again, somewhere between perspective and precision, is where our decision makers want us to be. And so the idea being that, how much confidence, should a decision maker need to have before they're ready to act? And before you answer that, I realize a lot of those decision makers, it's going to be, again, path dependent, context specific, a lot having to do with their own values and their own risk propensity. I know you love risk, but a lot of our, our executives and decision makers don't. So the question I want to ask you is, how do I know that I'm in the, the most desirable place between having the right amount of perspective and having the right amount of precision when I deliver, again, my analytical outputs to my executives and decision makers?
We know it's lonely at the top. It's also, relatively speaking, stupid at the top, and I'll qualify what I mean by that.
You're not casting aspersions. We know.
Yeah.
We know.
There is significant information asymmetry.
Sure.
In that top level. I'm working on this at the moment, looking at governance and assurance structures here. And one of the elements I'm looking at is feedback loops.
Yep.
Sorry, can you just pull me back onto the question again?
So the question was, where between this need for some level of precision and this need for maybe some higher levels of perspective, how do we know that we're in the right spot along that precision perspective continuum?
Gotcha. We've got to think like bats. It's echolocation. Okay, so in Q1, the CE and the board send an information request out into the environment. How long does it take for that echo bounce to come back? Does it even come back? Does it come back does it come back sounding like television? Do they understand the result? And the answer is, I confidently predict, is that they don't get that feedback loop. So what is occurring, therefore, as we sort of foray deeper into the information-rich heart of organizations? What's actually occurring?
Yeah.
Or another way of looking at it, what's the best metaphor to use? And the one I would always go to with data is astronomy, because data has mass, mass has gravitation, gravitation screws with time. It has effects. Okay, so one of the things that I see, and it's an odd scenario, is information power capture within organizations on a decreasingly useful information asset that's getting larger by data, but dumber by question. What an interesting situation to be in there, isn't it? And so then we go, well, if this isn't actually working, why do we have it? And one of the reasons we have it is assurance, 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 assurance. Why do we have lots of assurance? No trust, no trust, no trust, no trust, no trust.
Right.
It's a control. Okay. So in other words, jump through those hoops because boy, you need them.
No, absolutely. Let's. I'm looking at some of the comments over here. I think people kind of liked your your quote on the lack of, again, they're Jay Nakagawa, the lack of oxygen at the rarefied air level of a lot of these executives. So a lot of our executives, and one of the struggles we have, our executives often don't know what they don't know. Like most of us, it's not just our executives that I think suffer that. But sometimes they also don't tell us what they know. And with the reason being, a lot of executives, for reasons of power, I'm sure you will appreciate this. They already know the answers. They're just asking us to go out and either verify, confirm, or put another rubber stamp on that. How do we help our executives? How do we use data to help our executives overcome this? They don't know what they don't know, and sometimes they won't tell us what they know. Kind of problems that. We're just analysts. We're just there. We're there to support them, right? We're there to try to help them find the truth. But, sometimes they don't actually empower us with the right questions to seek the truth because they don't want to know it. What would you recommend from a data governance and kind of risk side of the equation? What kinds of methods, techniques, or tools might we use to try to help them overcome this?
First point before I continue, it's not their fault that we haven't figured out what they're interested in. All right.
Agreed.
Point one. Don't go near them unless you figure out what they're interested in. Otherwise, you're not just wasting their time, you're wasting the official formal time of the organization, which is a limited resource. So don't do that. If you don't know what's important to them, go and bloody find out first.
Right on.
Second thing, recognize again, there's these big temporal delays, the feedback loops on these people. Their information coming back can be months and years old. Tactically, they're in a minute by minute environment. Okay, so there is these massive lags. In the meantime, they think they're improving their mental models, and they very well may be. But then what will happen is that this information requested 2.5 years ago, because that's how long it takes us to get our stuff done, the answers come in and they're completely uninteresting questions anymore. No one cares about them. The time has moved on. So then we look at the modes of communication, of formal communication, the reporting. And I guarantee we will find it really hard for humans to inhabit. Just really hard. Here's a way to test. Look at all your major control documentation and count the percentage, the ratio of nouns to verbs. Guarantee you won't find many verbs, but the verbs are the critical ones because they're the words that people step into to be active and agentful in their environment. Agentful, I just made a word up.
I like that. I hadn't heard that one before, but I think we need to put that in the ISO defs.
It's mine. I'll send it to Zuckerberg. Does this get me a free pass on Meta land? Sorry, I didn't mean to mock. And now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, it always happens.
Oh, you were doing well. We were still great. I'm about to lose my train of thought too here. So
what do we have?
Yeah. So let's also talk about another kind of, dilemma or trade-off that we're always having to make. I mean, you were just talking about lags, by the way, the lags and the feedback loops being really long, and I love that verbs versus noun, by the way.
It's observable.
It is.
It really is.
It's tangible.
Yeah. It's actually the semantic knowledge graph representation of how we work. If you want to understand how organization works, just look at the damn words. Pardon me. Sorry. Just look at the words.
Absolutely. No, I again love that. I hadn't thought of that one before, but I can see where it's going to be cogent and helpful to us. So let's talk about another one of these trade-offs that we're making. So, you mentioned time lags and you mentioned these long feedback loops. There is a need today to decide faster and faster and faster. And yet, or at least they feel there's often a compulsion, a felt compulsion that I need to respond. Let me be clear about that. But there's also a need to be able to respond effectively and efficaciously. So how do we balance this quote unquote perceived need or compulsion for speed? Again, I gotta move quickly. It's the only way I can keep an advantage. I got to stay ahead of everybody. versus, holy cow, again, and here we go with risk and uncertainty. I'm going to make a really bad choice, and I'm going to go in a path dependent journey that's going to lead us off the cliff. How do we do that balancing act, or maybe, again, trade-off between those two?
Yeah. Sense and respond. So probe, sense and respond. Probe, sense and respond as a fundamental. So do not try and model the full risk surface. Don't try and do that. You'll be 3 years too late when you're right.
Right.
Time is this really weird thing. It's contextual. That's why I remember it's all this interaction. It's weird. We know that a past state can't be statistically recreated.
Right.
There are too many variables.
Right.
So there was a past, but there is a past. It instantly vanishes. All the once a cloud of probability coalesces, every other option is gone forever. That might be stretching it too much. But so what's going to happen is don't try. Of course, try, but you will destroy yourself in the need to understand a model. Part of what creates a sense of speed is a sense of lack of control, right? So imagine giant. We're all little water molecules in a hose, and the giant turns the hose on, right? There are some water molecules that want to get out there faster, so they're going to try and swim faster than anyone else. Their sense of time urgency is different. All right. So what this goes to is, what are you actually competing over, with, and for? Pick the right fight is one of the first things I'll do. I'll say. When you do that, you buy time. You create, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing, but you create a little time bubble of confidence, and things slow down. Things slow down. Things will speed up when crazy stuff happens and your adrenaline kicks in and your sense of time changes. But what is it, for instance, when you watch really practiced martial art masters in their 70s and 80s? How do they move so slow and yet defeat everyone? How did they do that?
Because they're two steps
ahead. Do that? Part of the element, when I dig into this, is that their internal sense of time is quite different. Right. One of the elements is information overload. We're not getting clear about what really, really matters. That's because we're usually not empirical enough.
Right.
When there is this high threat situation from, oh my God, I've only got 46 unknown quantities in my unknown unknowns, you're just constantly going to be freaked out. So you're going to be freaked out and wrong. How about that? It's a terrible place to be. So this is why I emphasize empiricism. Everyone should go and take a Scrum course.
You wouldn't happen to know any Scrum masters, on this particular call right now that might be able to help with that, would you?
No. But it's actually an easy way in. It's an easy way in.
It is.
Scrum is associated to IT, but is actually a really good decision framework for solving complex adaptive problems. It's unheralded, unsung in our area, I think.
So I want to deal with this time dimension kind of one more time here. And I'm not doing that to be funny, but a lot of our organizations gather data and gather more data and gather more data. A lot of them have been gathering data for months and years, and they've all stored it. And a lot of this data, has a shelf life. I guess that's the word I'm going to use for it. So my question is, what would you recommend, our folks in the audience do? How do you find a way to how do you know, first of all, what the shelf life of data is? How long can I employ it where it still is actually, again, leverageable for benefits and outcomes? Or when do I know it's gone sour? When do I know that data, again, if we collected it 2 years ago on a phenomena where, again, the context no longer exists, why would I want to apply it at all? So is there anything you would recommend about helping us to understand the shelf life of the data that we're working with and how to actually employ it in our insight development process?
Right. I would say apply half-life techniques. Think of data as having a half-life. It is widely understood scientific approach and method. And then recognize that the more data you're funneling into the big data machine, the denominator is increasing, right? Base rate neglect.
Right.
And those are the two elements. So it's actually currency to the problem space as well, I would say. Some situations, if we're working on archaeological problems, we want really raw data. In other situations, if we're wanting how best to market a product in a way that's not going to piss the millennials off, you need different age of data, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So think like an archaeologist. When was this data is the first thing I want to know.
Right.
I want to know how old I actually want to know how old the model is. So the data might be fresh, but the model is built, and the original conception of the model might go down to 1978. Oh my God, people still smoked in offices then. So those are the two things I'd look at.
I really like that, by the way. Your idea of thinking like an archaeologist is one of the roles that we often see benchmarked for people that do intelligence work. But another one is to think like a historian, and I know that's one of your favorites. So give us a little bit of perspective. If I was to apply that kind of thinking that a historian would do to problems of the current day, what kinds of things would you be recommending I should be doing? What kinds of skills might I want to be employing? Are there any historian tool sets that might be useful? And last but not least, again, what do I need to do with the data sets as well? So that, again, if I'm thinking like the historian, I can still utilize or leverage my data sets, for current and potentially future kinds of applications.
Roger. I'll try and back into that backwards. I managed to get the notes this time. So reduce the size of the data set. So data minimization isn't just something that those privacy lawyers drone on about. Okay, it's also a critical element of the scientific method.
It is.
Yeah, correct. How do you know how to minimize your data? Because you've got a really good theory of change.
That's right.
You know what doesn't count. It's already built into your model. Techniques from the historical world that the CI intelligence community should own. If there was an Olympics for historical techniques, the CI community should own counterfactuals. They should own it. And that is, you take a historical period that seems analogous to what we currently have, you find an important change, and then you reverse it. All right. And then you leave everything else as is, and then you see how long that changes the environment.
Right.
All right. What it does is it tricks the mind into running on two parallel tracks.
Love it.
Yes. And that kicks in our human superpower, which is analogical reasoning. Analogical reasoning, not numerical reasoning, is our superpower. That's what we're not going to ask AI for what's the best analogy to use in this environment. We all saw what happened to Tay. Oh, yeah. The other element is there's always a start and a stop period in good history work. Okay, so you're looking at this this curve, and you're looking at the interactions along the curve, and then you're proceeding time-wise because time did work in a certain way, and then you're looking for patterns, and then you're looking for loose ends and those contradictions. Where is my model wrong? Yeah, it's so fruitful, and anyone can do it. It's amazing.
No, it's again, very well accepted, highly demonstrated, robust, structured technique for analysis. And it's one that I don't think enough of the folks in our field actually use. So I very much appreciate you sharing that. Rowan, I can see we're actually at about a 1 minute left. So let me give you one last chance. I really appreciate it. I know I've given you a slew of probably pretty difficult concepts to work through, and you've done it with a deft skill. So any last things you would suggest to us that we should be doing or could be doing that might be beneficial for us moving forward.
Yeah, all right. I'll quote Public Enemy. Don't believe the hype. I'm going to go back to the 2 panels ago when I jumped on and started learning about competitive intelligence. Don't believe the hype, aka do not let technologists define the conversation. Yeah, I'm sorry. And also its corollary, do not let data scientists define the conversation of moving concepts into numbers. All right. There needs to be diagrams and models in between that process, because that's how people will go, no, that's not what I meant. Without those models, or without those intervening structures, you'll be reliant on the AI guy. And we're back in pre-Reformation days when people couldn't go to church and understand what was going on because the guy was talking in Latin and we're English.
Exactly.
What do we know? So there you go.
Really like that. Well, listen, we actually have reached the end of our hour. I don't know if that went slow or fast for you. Of course, we're in COVID time, so yeah, that's relative like everything else. But I truly, truly appreciate your perspectives, your insights. And by the way, your grace in handling some very difficult concepts, almost all of which I see as being highly applicable to what we do. So thanks again for your time. Thanks for joining all of the CI fellows in our summit today. We truly appreciate you.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you so much.
Cynthia?
Yes, thank you both for a thought-provoking discussion. Lots to think about, and again, multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, challenging us to get to the next level. And I also just love that we got to remain skeptical. Don't believe the hype, and be active and agentful. Yeah, copyright Rohan Light.
Yeah.
And Rohan, thank you so much for being here, given the time zone that you're in, and so and just for prodding us on and keeping to challenge us as intelligence practitioners as well.